things. It was quite an experience.
So Carrie came over and met you at the house in Germany with the kids?
She came over. She got her mother. Fortunately, took her out to the port in New Jersey, I guess it was, and she got on a boat called the SS Alexander, I think, and they were right halfway in the middle of the Atlantic, too close to make a decision which way to go. When they broke down, they had two engines, and one engine broke down completely, and they decided they loitered for about a day, deciding whether they're going to turn back or go forward. Now, this is the day before you had cell phones, so you keep track of it by watching the Stars and Stripes. What happened to the boat? Well, they finally decided they're going to continue, but they continued at 5 knots, which is roughly 5 miles an hour, across the Atlantic Ocean. If you've ever been across the Atlantic Ocean, and it took about 3 weeks to cross the Atlantic Ocean, and she had 2 kids. Miss Celeste must have been 4, and Michael must have been 2. And she tells me she was in a stateroom with some poor colonel's wife. They were there together for God knows how long. But anyway, they went to Bremerhaven. They ended up at Bremerhaven, which is northern Germany, a port. And they put them on a train in Bremerhaven. It drove to Nuremberg, and they provided me with a staff car and a driver, and we go. By that time, I was a major, so I had some clout. And I met her at Nuremberg and brought her back, and the girls, the German girls, had prepared a cake, a welcome cake, and all of that. And it was from then on. It was pretty. It was not easy. It was cold. It was the coldest winter they ever had out there. The Germans didn't have any coal, and when they went home, those that worked for us, they'd go to bed and they'd stay in bed until it's time to get up in the morning. We would get the coal, but we didn't get very much coal, and it wasn't very good coal. And
that was the only way to heat the house, was with the coal, like with a stove?
It had radiators. In the house that I was in, it had radiators. And the commissary, the only food we get, the Germans had nothing. There was no food. You can go to buy anything off. Everything was in America. Carrie would take a sled, put the 2 kids on the sled, and there was snow everywhere. And we'd go to the commissary and buy the food and bring it back. And that's how we existed.
How long? And so Carrie and the kids were there for about how long, Mr. Burke?
They weren't there too long, maybe 8 months. I was in the 40th Bomber Wing, which was the last B-17 outfit in Europe. But they didn't need bombardiers. When I got there, they realized they didn't need bombardiers. But when I was going through, first signing in, we were just a bunch of warm bodies, and the personnel officer would meet us. I remember he was a lieutenant colonel. Name was Triffy. I remember Triffy. And he was a pilot. He'd been a fighter pilot. And he looked at my thing, and he said, he's looking at my records. He said, "You graduated from college," which was rare. In those days, it wasn't rare, but it was not as like today. It was unusual, particularly in the military, because all the young guys were in the service. He said, "You graduated?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Can you write?" I said, "Yes, I can write." He said, "I need a public relations officer. You want the job?" I said, "Yeah, I'll take it." Because I wasn't going to be a bombardier. I was going to do something else.
Right.
And he said, "Okay, I want you to write me up a citation giving me the air medal." I said, "Well, what did you do?" He told me he shot down a German plane or something. So I wrote him up a citation for getting the air medal, and he got the air medal, and I got the job. And so I became the public relations officer for the 40th Bomber Wing, which gave me I handled all the newspaper reports and all of that, and I also had a photo lab, which introduced me to photography. And I had a civilian named Abe Goldberg from Maryland, who married a German girl who spoke Yiddish, and he spoke Yiddish, which was great. Yiddish is like German, and he was great for going around town and talking to the Germans. And he was a great photographer. And I got hold of a Leica camera at that time. And he had a contacts, and we used to argue about which was the best, and we'd go out and take pictures and compare them who had done the better job. I often wonder what happened to him. And anyway, that's what I did. But right after I got there, just a simple aside, they decided they're going to change my job. They're going to make me the provost marshal.
What's that mean?
Provost marshal is a sheriff. And it was rough over there. Everybody carried a gun. And the Germans were, what happened was, we had the Polish guards. Now, the Germans had really mistreated the Poles, and the Poles hated the Germans. But there were thousands of Polish men who went and served in the Allied forces, and they didn't want to go back to Poland where the Russians were. So we hired them as Polish guards, and they wore American uniforms dyed black. And they carried carbines, 30 caliber carbines, and they guarded the streets at night. And they would shoot. You didn't go at night. At night you could hear shooting all the time, because the Germans were trying to get back in their houses and steal stuff from their own houses.
And the Polish would shoot them.
And the Poles would shoot at them. So
and so
anyway, the personnel officer called me and said, "I got a new job for you. You're going to be the provost marshal." I don't know what a provost marshal does. He said, he said, you've been an instructor and training people. All you got to do is train your people and do it. It's real easy. So I went out to meet the provost marshal. He was getting ready to go home. He said, here, he gave me a Thompson submachine gun. He said, you'll need this. And he said, you can have my Jeep. And he said, I'll take it to the guardhouse. And went to the guardhouse, and it was full of murderers. I mean, they're pretty tough people in the military in those days. They were killing each other, and they were killing the Germans. And he said, watch these people. And I said, that's great. I've got a bunch of animals on behalf of Georgia. And after about a day or two, before I even did anything, somebody got better sense and changed and made me back into public relations officer. I was so glad.
I bet.
I didn't want to be a provost marshal. Anyway, and so that made me a public relations officer from then on. But that got me into the Nuremberg trials. See, Goering and them were being tried in Nuremberg.
Right.
We lived about 30 miles from Nuremberg. And so because of my connections with the people in Wiesbaden, Wiesbaden was the headquarters of the Air Forces in Europe. I was able to get a ticket to go to the Nuremberg trials.
So you would go to the trials and then do like press releases or press reports on the trials?
Oh no, I wasn't involved with, somebody else was doing that. My job was, I was just a spectator.
Okay.
I just wanted to see those guys I'd seen only before in newsreels. And they were sitting in the same room with me. They were in the box.
So you sat through some of the Nuremberg trials?
Yeah. Admiral Dönitz was on the stand when I was there. And he was a very dignified looking guy.
Now,
and in those days you could put on a headset and you could tune into which language you wanted. There was instantaneous translation. And the American prosecutor would ask him a question in English, and you could hear it in English, or you could, and he heard it in German. And he would answer in German and you would hear it in English.
And now who was the guy on trial you said? What was his name?
Admiral Dönitz. He was a guy that Hitler actually turned the Reich over to just before he killed himself. But he was not executed. He served a long time in jail. But at the time I was there, the issue was the submarine warfare, sinking the ships and letting the guys drown at sea. And he said, that's the nature of submarine. He was in charge of submarines. That's the nature of submarine warfare. He made sense. He said, the British, you just can't pick up anybody in submarines. There's no place to put them.
Right.
He said, the British do it and the Americans do it too. You just sink a ship and that's just tough. And he made sense. And anyway.
So what was it that brought you back to the States?
Okay.
So how did you end up back stateside?
I didn't stay the whole time because the 40th Bomb Wing phased out. Actually, our mission, the 40th Bomb Wing's mission at the time was photography. We were photographing all aerodromes in Europe, as far up to where the Russians were, in every country, and in Africa, and in the Netherlands, and all the northern countries too, in the Baltic countries. And we did that. We had 2 projects. One was Casey Jones project, which was high altitude, and the other was Casey Little, which was low altitude. Because when we went into the war, you might not know this, we had nothing. They were using postcards for invasions of places, or they're getting asking tourists to send any photographs they had of a harbor or someplace. We had nothing. But
So they had no intelligence of the area at all?
No, there was no intelligence. So, but we did after that, after Casey Jones. But then we accomplished. But as a result of that, see, we had, when I was in 40th Bombing, we had bases in Africa, and we had in France, in Germany, in England, and I traveled to all those bases. And so I traveled around a lot in the 40th Bombing, in B-17s. In fact, I went in a B-17 to Berlin.
Well, when you were traveling to these remote locations, Carrie, and your children were still...
Oh, she stayed home, yeah.
She was in New Iberia at that point?
No, after.
Or she was at the house in...
Yeah, but she stayed home.
Germany.
I'd travel, and, just on a weekend or something like that. And so...
So I'm kind of curious if we could fast forward, or how did you end up with a law career?
Okay,
what kind of led you to that?
I'll move on and fast forward, cut to the chase. But we can't just cut to the chase because it doesn't make sense unless I tell you. There was a chance to come home. We did our job, and they asked anybody who wants to go home to go home. Well, by that time, Carrie was pregnant again. So I said, well, that was not a place to have a child. And so I said I volunteered to come back home. So I was assigned to 43rd Bomb Wing in Tucson, Arizona, at Davis Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And I went down there. And then Carrie stayed here to have baby. She had Alan born, he's the only child we had born in Iberia. But I went to Tucson and lived without her for a while. And I was the public relations officer there. And had a photo lab there too. And I was doing pretty well. I was still a major, okay. And then, but I had a desk in an office and papers would come in.
Uh-huh.
And one day, the Air Force was, because of the Russians, we were just beginning to really start booming. They hadn't really started yet. And they had just enacted the Code of Military Justice, Act of 5 May 1950. And in the old, when I was out on a lot of courts martial in Germany as a member, and I was familiar with it. But in those days, the lawyers, the counsel were not necessarily lawyers.
I knew that, actually.
And there was, in a general court martial, there was one lawyer who was called the law member. And he did not participate in the deliberation, but he didn't rule the thing. The president of the court ran the thing. And then, and it was, court martial really a disciplinary machine rather than what it became, similar to a federal court. And under the new law, Code of Military Justice, it became much like a federal court. Required lawyers, required a law officer or a judge. They later call him a military judge. In fact, I'm a military judge. I got a certificate. I'm a judge. I got a certificate. I sat as a judge on a lot of cases. But when I was at Tucson, I was at public relations, and these things come across your desk. And I saw this thing. The Air Force was realizing that because of that act, they needed all kinds of lawyers. And all the lawyers in World War II had gotten out because they're all reservists. We had a lot of lawyers, but they're all reservists. And they'd gotten out. There were very few regular officers who were. So they had and not only that, but as I told you earlier, it was kind of rare to have a college degree.
Uh-huh.
The Air Force was really expanding and becoming professional, and they needed professional people. And so the piece of paper I had said that anybody that had any college that wanted to finish their courses could apply, and or you could apply for anything, postgraduate training or finish to get a degree. And I saw this thing, and I've got a degree, but for postgraduate you can apply for law, a whole bunch of things. Well, 1, 2, 3, and I put on in. I couldn't imagine sending me to law school, but I put it down as number 1 because I had pre-law at Southwestern. Law and journalism because of my public relations, and photography. I put in for those 3 to go to university. and I never forgot about it. And then one day I got a piece of paper telling me I've been accepted to law school at the University of Denver.
University of Denver?
Denver, yeah.
How old were you at that point?
How old was I?
Yes, sir. How old were you when you think, roughly?
What time? 46? I was 26.
Yeah,
You've done a lot of living by the age of 26.
And I later found out from somebody who told me they asked for a particular school, and they got it. I might have asked for LSU or Tulane, but I just was so glad that I couldn't imagine it. And I like Denver anyway, so off I go to Denver. And there were 3 of us in my class that were going to law school. Paul McGinnis and Dean Raz and me. And there was I think we were the only lawyers. There were a couple of other people from the Air Force in the same deal. And we had a colonel, I forget his name, but anyway, he was in charge. There must have been about 10 of us going to the University of Denver in various things. 3 of us in law school. And then, so we going to law school, doing fine. And then along comes the Korean War. I said, oh shoot, here we go, they're gonna call us back. And they called all the guys back, but they left us in the law school. We couldn't believe it.
So you made a good choice.
And we stayed in, and the other guys went off and got killed, I guess. So when I finished, I got my degree, and I was admitted to practice in federal courts at Colorado. And the Colorado bar exam was tougher than Louisiana, I'll tell you that. It was. It was 3 days, but it was 3 days with no break.
Oh, wow.
And it was tough. Anyway, but I got my orders then, and I was assigned to Tampa, Florida, MacDill Air Force Base. And Paul McGinnis had been a judge advocate as a non-lawyer. He'd been working, so he was pretty useful. But now he was a lawyer, and but I ranked him. And so I was a staff judge, and he was assigned at the same time, and he worked with me, and
Okay.
he was a great help. But he worked for me.
And who was that you said?
Paul McGinnis,
Paul
he's
McGinnis.
dead now.
Okay.
And so I was at MacDill, and then because of the Korean War, I was in the 307th Bomb Wing. My bomb cruiser, 307th, was over in Okinawa bombing, and we lost a lot of people over there.
So when you were at MacDill, your function at that point was you were the JAG Corps.
I was a JAG, yeah. I was still on flying. At some point, we got notice that we had to. Anybody on flying status had to decide whether they wanted to stay on flying status or be a judge advocate, because under the law that passed, the judge advocate general had control of the judge advocates, and he wasn't going to let them go. Mm-hmm. And the chief of staff of the Air Force wanted rated people to fly airplanes, and so it was decided you had to decide. And I decided, well, most of the pilots rated stated pilots. Most of the bombardiers and navigators went on, and there's a psychology to that, I guess. But anyway, I gave up my flying rating and just became a judge advocate. So I was at MacDill, the staff judge advocate for quite a while, and from then I went to Maxwell, to the Air Staff Command Staff School. Best law school I've ever been to, really.
And where was that?
It was the Judge Advocate School at Maxwell Field in Alabama.
Okay.
And that really qualified me to be a military judge. And because then I was sent from there to Barksdale, Shreveport. And I was the chief of military justice at 2nd Air Force. 2nd Air Force had maybe 10, 12 bases in Puerto Rico and the southeast of the United States, all bombers. The 2nd Air Force was a bomber outfit. And but I used to travel a lot as a military judge, and I was also served as it's kind of like on a court of appeals. We did nothing but write reviews, and but the final action was taken by the commander of the 2nd Air Force.
Uh-huh.
That's where the military court-martial jurisdiction ends, at the 2nd Air Force level.
So you went from MacDill, then did you go from there to Shreveport and served in the JAG Corps in Shreveport? Is that?
Yeah. I was in. And that was the best, of course, by that time, Carrie joined me. And
And at that point,
that's
Carrie
an
was
old
living-
base.